Now I'm very happy to introduce our presenters for this evening. Vicki Brett-Gack is a writer, blogger, master certified vegan lifestyle coach, whole food plant-based culinary instructor, and certified personal chef. Trained in nutrition for a healthy heart and in dietary therapy for reversing common diseases, she is also Forks Over Knives plant-based certified and holds certificates in plant-based nutrition and in wellness counseling. Connect with Vicki through her Ann Arbor Vegan Kitchen blog at AnnArborVeganKitchen.com. And I'm also going to share that link in the chat if you're interested. She has some wonderful recipes. And Lisa Gott is an artist, photographer, vegan lifestyle coach, and educator, as well as a cookbook author. She's been happily, deliciously vegan for over 14 years and enjoys showing others how simple and inexpensive it can be to enjoy a plant-based diet as part of a vegan lifestyle. And you can connect with her and check out her wonderful recipes at planted365.com. So thanks again to our wonderful presenters for being with us tonight and for all of you for joining. And now I'm going to pass it over to Lisa. Lisa, thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Olivia, and thank you, Vicki. I am so happy to be here with you guys and to be involved in something that VegMichigan is putting on. I love the organization. I love the Veg Fest. It's one of my favorite. I wait for it every year. So what I'm going to do today, this is one of my favorite soups. It is so easy. It literally takes just a few minutes once you have the squash roasted. And when I say squash, it's just any kind of winter squash. I noticed in the grocery store, we pass, the big cardboard box full of all these beautiful winter squashes, and they just kind of sit there. They never seem to get any lower. They just kind of get dehydrated. I don't ever see anybody with them in their shopping carts. Before I was vegan, I used to use them as decoration. I would just sit around the house and use them as decoration and then throw them away. But those squash, they're so beautiful as decoration. They're absolutely delicious to use as food, which is what they're intended for. So I got a couple, and I just wanted to tell you about them. And you can use any type of squash in this soup. So this is like this right here. It's absolutely beautiful. That's a Turk's turban. And it's kind of a, it's pretty orange and starchy in the middle. Other ones like the Acorn Squash are going to be a little bit more yellow, a little bit more watery. This one's good, just like cut it in half and then bake it and then stuff it with, I don't know, like rice and like some Beyond sausage. That's what we do with it. And Hubbard squash, bigger. This is actually small for Hubbard squash. Sometimes I get these for Thanksgiving, and they're like just huge, and you can cut them in half and put stuffing in and stuff like that. And this, I had never heard of this. This is a carnival. It's just so pretty. And what I've used today is a carnival squash and an acorn squash. And I don't think I've ever used a carnival squash, so I'm not 100% sure what it's going to look like inside. So for the soup, you just start with baked squash. My super secret method of baking squash is to just scrub the outside, make sure that the outside is clean, because when you cut through it, you're going to be dragging stuff through it. But other than that, scrub it, throw it in the oven at 425 for about 35-40 minutes. It starts out, it gets kind of shiny, and then it'll turn brown a little bit on the outside. And then when you can stick a knife in, and when it's nice and soft on the inside, they're done. Take them out. That's it. You don't have to poke holes in them. You don't have to like peel them and cube them and stuff like that. You just throw them in there, bake the heck out of them until they're done. And they're delicious. They kind of caramelize and stuff on the inside. So for this, for this recipe, we're going to use the winter squash. So it calls for 2 cups cooked winter squash. I suspect I'm going to get a little bit more than that out of these 2 squash. So you just cut them in half. So this is the carnival. And this one is a little bit more yellow. So they're full of seeds. If you've ever seen, I think they're pretty on the inside. If you've ever seen the Frida Kahlo still lifes, she does a lot of paintings of squash innards, basically. So I'm just going to scrape out the seeds, and it comes out like literally just 2 seconds. That one. rose seeds out. So yeah, so I'm just going to scrape the flesh out and throw it in the Vitamix. If you don't have a Vitamix, that's fine. You can use, you know, you can use what you have. You can use, if you had to, you can use an immersion blender. Basically, yeah, just mix it up in the blender. I love the Vitamix. If I had, before I got one, if you had told me that I would think that a blender was worth $400, I would have told you were crazy. I've used it. I've had it for about 7 years. I've used it at least once every single day, probably more. They have fantastic, fantastic customer service and warranties and stuff. So anyway, so yeah, so this is yellow, and it smells so good. Acorn squash. I think this one's kind of yellow too. I can't remember now. Butternut squash is going to be a little bit more orange. So yeah, so this is kind of yellow too. And I'm only going to use half of this because the recipe is just for 2 cups. Of squash. This is about 2 cups. You don't have to be real precise with this. I heard somebody say once that cooking, the way she called it, she said, it's a tasty thing. I thought, oh my God, that is so brilliant. That's exactly what it is. It's a tasty thing. And I don't know, you kind of got to taste it as you go. So 2 cups of the squash, about, maybe a little bit more. And then I like to put fruit in my squash soup. And today I'm using a pear. It can be, you can use a pear, you can use an apple. If you don't have an apple, you know, one time I wanted to make the soup and I didn't have, pears or apples, and I had apricots. And so I used apricots, and it was so delicious. The fruit just kind of adds, I don't know, it just adds that fruity sweetness to it. So I do not bother, because I have a Vitamix, I don't bother to peel this. I just put it in like that. And I don't really measure, like I don't chop it up and measure it. I just put in one right here. And you do wash them beforehand. But other than that, that's it. Throw it in there. And then let's see. I didn't measure any of this out yet. So I add a little bit of oil. You know what, honey, could you give me that lemon juice? So I'm going to put a little bit of oil. That right there is maybe like 2 tablespoons. If you don't want to use oil, you don't have to. It emulsifies it a little bit with the oil and lemon juice together, the acid and the oil. Add a little bit of garlic, about a teaspoon, depending on how much you like garlic. I love onion powder, so I would say, oh, add a tablespoon of onion powder, but if you don't like it, don't add quite as much. And then pepper. I love pepper. Black pepper, and then I like things a little bit more spicy. You can add crushed red pepper flakes. So I'm just going to add a couple shakes of crushed red pepper flakes, and then I'm going to add some lemon juice. We're kind of cooking without salt right now, so I'm not going to add any salt. If we decide that we want it, first, if we decide that we want some salt in this, we'll add it to the table. But if you like things saltier, or if that's what you do, by all means, add the salt at this point. A little bit of lemon juice. And I just found this at the store the other day. It was on sale. It's only like 25 calories a cup. Cashew milk I usually use. So Delicious coconut milk, the unsweetened, because it's really super mild. And so this was called for 2 cups. Plant-based milk, your favorite plant-based milk that's not sweetened and not flavored. If you use a plant-based milk in this that has vanilla in it, it's not going to be all that tasty. Yeah. Got some water here for blending. So yeah, so that's about it right there. And just gotta start slow. And then that's it. This is a little dish. Favorite resale shop. It's a little pumpkin. And so, yeah, so that's pretty much done. I did not need to use any water. You might need to use water, you might not need to use water. That's, you know, it depends on how watery your squash are and how thick you like your soup, pretty much. So, so yeah, so there is delicious squash soup. Now my purchase of this is totally justified, and it even has a lid. How cute. And so yeah, and I just wanted to do a cost comparison. So this is made at home. Make it however you want. And I found the squash for, I don't know, I think they were 99 cents a pound. So when I was at the store, I also saw this. This was $5 for 32 ounces. And so we made about probably more than 32 ounces of soup right there, and it cost about $2. So it can be economical to do this as well. But anyway, and to finish this off, I always put, you know, I put some little bit more red pepper flakes, some peppers. Sometimes you can, I drizzle it with just a little bit of maple syrup. Anyway, it's delicious. And then if you want it warmer than this, I don't like super hot soup, but if you want it warmer than this, you can heat it up on the stove once it's blended in the blender, or you can put it in the microwave. Either way, to get it to whatever temperature it is that you like your soup. But anyway, that is winter squash soup. I'm done. Hand it over to Vicki.
Well, thank you. That looks really great. It's really interesting to see all the different squashes too, Lisa. Thank you for showing us that. So I'm going to make a toasted bread stuffing with potatoes and sweet potatoes and fresh herbs. And I'm starting with some bread, which I've turned into croutons. And you could use any kind of bread that you like, but I'm using Ezekiel bread that comes in the freezer section as a loaf of bread. And I'm only using 4 pieces of this bread, and I toasted it. And that's all I did was toast it and then cube it. So it's not even really cubes, it's really just little squares of this toasted bread. And so I made a batch a little while ago. This one I did cut with a knife, and it kind of crumbles a little bit because it's pretty firm by the time we toast it. And I was thinking there's really some different ways that you could prepare this. So I've actually got a bowl now of these croutons. You can hear that they're nice and crispy. And these just by themselves would be good on the top of the soup that it looks like, you know, on top of Lisa's soup. You could just put these toasted croutons. You could bake these, you could air fry these, but I just put it in the toaster and then cubed them, as I say, you know, into little squares. So I'm starting with this base of just 4 pieces of bread. It's not really that much, but it turns into a big casserole once we're all done. So the next thing I'm adding to that is a bunch of potatoes. So I have 4 medium-sized Yukon Gold potatoes. I've used red skin potatoes before. Really, you can use any kind of potato you like. And 1 sweet potato. And again, you know, if you wanted to just go all one or the other kind, you could, but I like this mixture of color and flavor because the sweet potato adds just this tiny bit of flavor, of sweetness, and the starchiness of the white potatoes. I just think it's so great together. And I just love this combination. Stuffing used to be one of my favorite things before I was vegan. And of course, the old stuffing I made had eggs in it, you know, a decade ago. And so it took me a while and many tries to come up with a texture that I thought was very similar to that creamy kind of texture that the old stuffing that I used to make had. And it's the potatoes that do the trick. So I have these potatoes. I actually just microwaved them, and I'm just putting gloves on. You wouldn't need to do that, but it's only because my hands are going to get a little sticky. I took the peel off. I really just microwaved these potatoes for 4 minutes or so. And I'm just going to add these to the bowl. They're nice and soft. You could bake them instead. You could boil them on the stove. Each of those things will kind of have a slightly different moisture content once you do that, but easy to kind of adjust by eye as you're putting this all together. So, I put a couple of these potatoes in together and ended up with these and pulled the skin off after they were cool enough to touch, after they rested. So I'm, again, just kind of adding these. You really wouldn't even need to cut them. I could just break them apart like this as well, which is what I did with the bread, the first batch that I made that I'm going to show you in a moment. But so I'm just taking these potatoes and I'm really kind of breaking them apart. You could, again, make them neater shapes if you wanted to. And that's the next step, is just adding the potatoes and sweet potatoes to this crispy bread. And now I'm going to add to that the next thing, which is broth. And I actually bought I use Pacific or Trader Joe's vegetable broth, which has no sugar or oil in it. I like it because it's just vegetables and garlic and spices, and it's, I think, really good. So this is the kind I prefer, but you could use any kind of broth you like. You could even use water and add more seasoning, but I'm using 1 3/4 cups of broth, and I'm adding that to my bowl now that has my potatoes and my bread. And it's going to take just a minute for it to kind of soak up some of this liquid. And to this now, I'm going to add my seasoning, which is just a little bit of salt. I am using salt, but you could certainly leave this out if you wanted to. A little bit of salt, a little bit of pepper, and a little bit of a Cajun seasoning. So that's got a little bit of garlic and chili in it, a little bit of, spice. You can certainly do whatever you like. You could make this like an Italian seasoning. You could add whatever you like. You could add nuts to this or dried fruit if you wanted to. But so now I've got just the seasoning in here. And to this, I'm going to add some fresh herbs. So I actually have a little package. You could buy whatever herbs you like, but I like this combination that's called a roasting herb blend. And it's a combination of some Italian flat leaf parsley and some rosemary and thyme. And I'm going to say I'm not a huge fan. I know a lot of people love rosemary. They can't get enough of it. To me, it's really strong and a little too like a pine tree kind of flavor. So I only like a little bit, but you could use as much as you like. But I love the fresh flavor compared to the dried herb, which for me is just too, it's kind of like pokey, porcupine needle. So I like the softer nature of the pliable, fresh rosemary leaves. And I'm really only using a few, but again, you could do to taste what you like. I'm using maybe 4 or 5, maybe 6 of the leaves. And then to that, I'm adding some fresh thyme. So I'm taking twigs that are of fresh thyme, and I'm just the sprigs kind of pulling off the leaves off of the stem. And I'm going to do this with 5 or 6 of these. And to that, I'm also going to add some fresh parsley. And you could use as much parsley as you want because it would be wonderful in here. This little package didn't have as much as I might use normally. So I might just buy a separate parsley and add a little bit more. But the thyme smells so good. And it's really a lovely, aromatic to add to this. So we've got a little bit of thyme and a little bit of this rosemary and some parsley leaves. And I'm just going to give it a kind of a quick chop. And then I'm going to add that to the bowl as well. And then you can add really as many vegetables as you want. And I'm going to show you my next step here. So I'm just giving this kind of a quick chop. And I'm going to sprinkle this right into my bowl, right on top of my potatoes, bread, and broth. And it looks like this at this point. And my next step is to add onion and celery that I just sauteed. I actually just sauteed this in water, but you could certainly do in oil if you like. I actually avoid oil. So for me, you know, I've just added it with, I just did a saute in water. You could saute in broth if you preferred. But for me, it gets nice and caramelized, just like this. You can see it's kind of brown, golden, nice and soft. The onions are translucent and nice. All the vegetables are nice and tender. And this gives so much flavor. You could add some garlic if you wanted to this, or a shallot or leeks or anything you like. But that's as simple as it is. So to this now, I'm just going to give it a stir to combine all these flavors. And if you wanted to, you could take a potato masher and just mash those potatoes down just a little bit more so that they really kind of get a little bit of potato bite into every forkful that you'll be having. And, or you can just leave them kind of more larger pieces. It's really, really flexible and you can do kind of whatever you like. You could really do the same thing with the bread. In fact, you could do a combination of, you know, different types of bread if you wanted to. But now we've just got it nice and mixed together like this, just all combined. There's our stuffing ready to go. And I'm just going to put it into a casserole dish like this. We're going to see if this all fits. If it doesn't, you could actually put some of this into little muffin cups and bake it as individual servings. But I think this may all fit. We'll see. And then once we get it all into the pan, yep, looks like it's going to fit just fine. So I'm just going to get this all in the pan, kind of spread it out nicely. And then we're going to bake it in the oven at 375, uncovered, for about 35 minutes is what my recipe says, what I'm telling you to do. But today, I actually, and it just may be because the moisture level in the house or the bread or the potatoes or something, maybe my vegetables, it took a little longer. So what I was looking for, it looks like this in the pan as you're ready to go into the oven. I cooked it more like 45 minutes. So 35, everything's cooked. There's really nothing raw in here. But to get to the texture I was looking for, it took about 45 minutes. And this pan is still a little bit warm. And it looks like this. And what I wanted was the top to feel kind of firm. And then it's ready to scoop, ready to, in fact, let's do that with a spoon just so you can see how it looks. And we can plate this. So that we've got, you know, all these colors ready to go on your Thanksgiving buffet table. And it's still steaming a little bit. And what is really nice about this, it's really delicious with the herbs and the potatoes. It's just, for me, it's just like the ultimate comfort food, really perfect for the holidays, but really nice any time of year. I tend to only make it around Thanksgiving because that's when I think of the word stuffing. But it took me a long time to kind of come up with this mixture, and I just really, really like it. And I'm just going to add to say that besides being just delicious as is, I love this the next day with like taking small little 1 inch or 2 inch pieces and kind of putting it together in a little mound with my hands, creating a little ball and air frying them, like a whole platter of those air fried. And then they get extra crispy on the outside and they're still soft inside. And for me, it's just really delicious. So I hope you try it and like it too. Back to you, Lisa.
Thank you so much, Vicki. That looks so good. I have been a fan of Vicki's blog for, oh my gosh, 10 years? Is that how long? Wow. All of her recipes are
Right back
so
at you, Lisa. Thank you.
and you know, it's amazing. She makes everything so healthy and like no oil, and it just looks and is fabulous. So I am a big, huge fan of Vicki, and the Ann Arbor Vegan Kitchen is her blog if you haven't read it. So okay, so this is a main dish salad, and I'm gonna look at my recipe. This is something else that is so easy that, except for the cooking time, you know, it just takes a few minutes, maybe a little bit longer than the soup. But so the thing that you do first, because they do require cooking, is to chop up and peel and chop up the beets. Beets are extremely good for you. They contain nitric oxide, which is really good for your cardiovascular system. And these, I'm not using the greens today, and these aren't like, I don't know, my grocery store today. Their greens weren't quite as fresh as they usually are, but these are really good. You can chop these up and put them in salads. I'm not going to use them today because they're just a little bit wilty, but anyway, these are good for you too. So, but today I'm just going to be chopping up and peeling the beets. I've seen a couple of different ways to peel or to roast beets and then peel them. I've seen that method where you just kind of wrap them up in tin foil and stick them in the oven until they're done, and then rub the skin off. I've done that before. For this one, I just used the vegetable peeler and peel it. Either way, whichever method you use, you get red hands. And I don't know, for this, I like putting it in with all the other vegetables and letting them all get kind of crispy, which doesn't happen when you're roasting the skin. So either way, whatever your favorite method of roasting your beets. Today I'm doing it this way. Yeah, they are. It's a beautiful color. This is the beet juice is one of my favorite colors. It's that magenta, that really deep magenta, and I just think it's so beautiful, especially when they're raw. So, and that's another thing, you know, if you didn't want to roast your beets, this salad would be great with raw beets also. And, you know, they're really super good for you either way. I did not like beets for a long time. When my daughter was little, you know, I would feed her the, you know, the baby food beets, and she didn't want to eat them. And I was like, oh, let me taste them, see why she doesn't want them. And I was like, oh man, I can see why she doesn't like them. And now I love them. I love them raw. I love them cooked. I get them, you know, get them pickled, get them in salads pickled. So anyway, but for this, I'm just kind of chopping them up. And whatever for you is, you know, a bite-sized piece. That's probably a little big. I'll probably cut it in half. And anyway, but so yeah, and then I put them in just a baking dish. Just any kind of baking dish. This is, I think, the 8x8, 9x9. And then the other thing that is going in here that is also seasonal right now. Beets are you can get beets. I can get them fresh in my local grocery store all the time. Brussels sprouts kind of come and go. So right now is Brussels sprouts season. And they're basically, you know, little tiny cabbages, and just cut that I cut the hard end off. And then for this salad, I quartered them to make them more bite-sized pieces. So anyway, so that I did the Brussels sprouts, and I did some red onion. You can use white onion, is just as good. And then I also added in some radishes and just cut them in half, you know, wash them really good, and throw them in the baking dish with the beets onions and Brussels sprouts. And then I drizzle it with, if you're using oil, drizzle with just a little tiny bit of olive oil and some balsamic vinegar. Or there's also something called a balsamic glaze, which is balsamic vinegar and I think it's a little bit of sugar in there. And then just a little bit of maple syrup. Put that in the baking dish. Bake it covered with with tin foil so it doesn't get too brown. And I've got some here that is still pretty warm. And they just kind of cook down to that right there. They're absolutely beautiful. And so this is the main dish salad. So we've got the some greens. This is what they had at the store. That was the most plentiful and the most economical yesterday. So we got just some romaine, but you can use anything you want. Arugula would be really good with this. And so yeah. Oh, you know what? Let me go ahead and do this. No, let me do this first. So yeah, so I just throw the roasted vegetables on top of the salad. And so, yeah, so I cooked these for, I don't know, I cooked them for about 40 minutes, all told. Just do it until they're as soft as you want them to be, until they're, until the beets and the Brussels sprouts are as soft as you need them to be. It smells delicious. So there's, all that stuff in the bottom, the balsamic glaze that's left over in the bottom, which kind of acts like a dressing. And I also, though, add another dressing, and that is, I think I have a half a cup of maple syrup listed in the recipe. This might be more of like a third of a cup because I'm not feeling like sweet stuff in. So a little bit of maple syrup, a little bit of balsamic vinegar. And kind of just my go-to stuff. A little bit of garlic powder, a little bit of onion powder, crushed red peppers. I put crushed red peppers flakes, I think, in everything just about. And stir this up. And this makes a really great dressing for the salad. And then in addition to the salad dressing, the other thing that I like to add on here, and I've already made them, is I take, and it's just candied walnuts and pecans. So I take just a handful of pecans, handful of walnuts, handful of walnuts, a little bit of maple syrup, and you can use a pinch of brown sugar if you're doing sugar. I'm not going to add this because I don't think tonight, but you can certainly add some brown sugar or not. Either one is, I mean, it's delicious nuts with delicious maple syrup. You can't really make it taste bad. I add a little bit of cinnamon. Microwave that in 30-second increments, and then what happens is just stir it up and to coat the nuts. And then what happens is do it in 30-second increments until they're pretty hot. Oh, these are congealed. These have been sitting here cooling, and the whole idea is, I'm just cooking for me and my husband, so that's not, I'm not wearing gloves to do this. But anyway, so yeah, so they're like just candied nuts to put on top of the salad. And so they're sweet, they got a little bit of the cinnamon flavor. And you do like really caramelize. So anyway, And they're delicious, and they just add that. It's kind of like, you know, the Michigan salad when you get the candied pecans, something like that. And then, what else do I have to go on? Was there, oh, and so like my husband has been helping me this evening to do the recipe demo, and so he's starving. So if you are somebody who needs a little bit more than a salad, adding some rice to this can make it a little bit more, even more substantial. So I'm going to put some brown rice on his and maybe some quinoa. So that would add a little bit to that too. So anyway, yeah, this is what that looks like. And I hope you try it. Thanks so much. I'm done.
Lisa, that looks so good. That looks really, really delicious. And just a quick correction, I noticed that I said 35 minutes is what I usually bake my stuffing for, but it's actually 40. I noticed that I say on my recipe, and I cooked it today for closer to 50. So it's more like 45 to 50 rather than the 35 to 40. So just I clarify that. But again, just kind of touch it at the point that you're just double checking to make sure it feels kind of ready to, you know, just that it's the right texture for you. So now it's time for dessert. And so I'm going to make some slow cooked baked apples. And I'm going to start with about half of a cup of water that I'm going to put into a slow cooker, a small-ish, medium-sized 3 or 4 quart slow cooker. And then to that, I'm going to put my stuffed apples. So here's what we're going to do. I'm going to start with 3 apples is what fits in here. So that's what I'm going to do. And I'm just going to take off the top. It just makes it a little easier to get into, of course, wash these. And it just makes it easier to get inside and core them. What I want to try to do is I'm carefully taking the core out is not go all the way through to the bottom. I've had that happen before, but I'm trying to avoid it because then my stuffing will leak out the bottom. So what I'm going to do now is try to pull out the core, and I'm using just a melon ball tool to just sort of get myself into the middle where I can pull out the seeds and the, you know, primary part of the core, and without going all the way to the bottom, because again, I don't want to break through. So that's what I'm doing first with all 3. And it's a pretty, you can, if you don't have this tool, you could use a spoon. You can even use, you know, a knife basically, if you're kind of careful. But I'm basically trying to get a nice section inside for my filling. And the filling is super easy. It's kind of like a little miniature oatmeal cookie by the time we're done putting this filling together. And you can, there's a lot of flexibility here too. It's kind of my template, but if you wanted to, you could add some nuts to this or some other kind of dried fruit. But now we've got our 3 apples with a center ready for our filling. And before we get to that point, I'm going to just do a little bit of a peel just to kind of make it pretty. You could peel maybe halfway down if you wanted to. Oops. If you wanted to, but I find that just kind of peeling the top, basically 1/3 of the apple, helps to kind of keep the whole thing together. And depending on your slow cooker, it may take a little bit of trial and error. I have had on occasion where I cooked it for a little bit longer, and depending on the apple, it started to sort of begin to collapse a little. And I do want to have it be a whole apple that I can pull out and serve when it's cooled off just a little. So I have found that certain apples tend to work better, and I am using today an envy apple, and these are pink lady. So I'm going to show you the envy apples, which I just happened to find. Honeycrisp works very well, as you know, you really want something that's just not going to turn to applesauce. So something that will kind of hold its shape. And again, might take a little trial and error, but now we've got our apples prepped. And so we're ready for our filling. So what I'm going to do in a small bowl is add 1/4 cup approximately of oats, about a teaspoon of cinnamon. a teaspoon of apple pie spice, which is really just a mixture of different spices that include cinnamon and allspice and nutmeg, and you could use pumpkin pie spice if you wanted, which has cloves as well. And I'm just going to mix that together. And to that, I'm going to add 1 tablespoon of date syrup. I try to avoid sugar. So date syrup is a whole food, you know, it's just the dates that goes into this. So I like this. You could use maple syrup if you don't have date syrup. And then I'm just going to make sure that I get all of that wonderful flavor out of the spoon because it's so sticky. And then I'm going to just add some dried fruit. And this is kind of optional, but it just adds a little sweetness. And so I'm taking some apricots. I've got 6 little apricots, and I say 1 medjool date, but I actually didn't have that. I've got the smaller Deglet Noor date. So I'm using 2 of them because they're quite small. And I'm just going to do a quick chop of those. As these bake, they begin to kind of soften and get more moist. But I'm going to just kind of slice them up here. Maybe a little mincing by the time I'm done. So I'm just giving these a little chop, and then these are going to go into the bowl, and we're just going to mix this all up together. And again, if you wanted to, you could add pecans or walnuts or whatever you like to this mixture. And now just into the bowl they go. We give it a little stir. To get my filling. And I don't want it to be too wet, but I do want all of the oats and, you know, the cinnamon mixture and the apple pie spice to get mixed in nicely so that everything is nicely kind of homogenized, and the oats are a little bit, you know, have gathered a little bit of that date syrup on it as well. And again, you can use a different kind of liquid sweetener if you like. And there we go. It's kind of the texture of a cookie batter now, like an oatmeal cookie. That looks like this. And I'm just going to, with my hands, just stuff this inside of each of the apples. And I usually find that this is about the right amount. Depends on the size of the apple, I guess. Although that, now that I'm thinking of it, the size of the opening, because I'm using that same peel or that same coring tool, will always be about the same. I guess the thing that might change would be the size of your apricots or date. You know, what you could use raisins instead, by the way, if you wanted to use a different fruit, or cranberries, or in fact, you could probably use fresh cranberries. So I'm just basically trying to kind of get all of this, which has all this extra flavor and spice in here. And then into, here comes the easy part. We're just going to put this into, I would kind of neaten it up a little. I would take a little more time with it than I am right now, but I'm just going to put that right inside of our slow cooker. And it's got that water in it that's going to help keep it steaming. And then I'm going to literally just turn it on to slow cooker with the top on it for an hour to an hour and a half. You want to kind of just get it to be just the right amount of tender so that it's baked apple texture. And I made these right before we came on. And so we've got these that are just ready to enjoy. Nice and soft. Ready to go. And that's it. It's really easy to have that, you know, you can, again, kind of customize this to whatever flavors you like if you want to use a different kind of fruit or dried fruit inside. And it's a nice addition to a holiday table.
Thanks so much to both of you. All of those recipes look wonderful. As always, I know we wish we could actually taste them ourselves, but hopefully a lot of us will actually be making it. I'm going to go ahead. Lisa, I'm going to add you to the spotlight so we can see both of you. Okay, let's get going with the questions. So the first one is just, and I actually wasn't sure of this either, to both of you, are these recipes that you demo tonight, are they on your respective blogs? Or are they recipes you haven't put on your blogs yet?
Well, mine are actually on my blog.
Okay.
So yes, they are there in case you want to, in case you lose your copy or something like that.
Awesome.
Mine are not on my blog yet, and I just kind of made them special for tonight, but I will be putting them on there with some photos. Probably make them again tomorrow and put them on with some pictures. So they will be there. They're not there yet.
Wonderful. So the first few questions are for you, Lisa, regarding your soup. So with the squash, your technique of just cooking them whole. Can you do that with any of the squash varieties or all the ones you've tried at least?
I do. That's the method that I use. That's the big fancy method that I use for all of the squash. And I also do that with sweet potatoes as well. I don't do anything other than scrub them and throw them in the oven. And it just seems to be the most successful for me.
Very nice. That's a good tip. I know it's a huge struggle sometimes to cook a raw squash. So that's great to know we can just roast them whole, make it easy.
It is.
Absolutely. And the last question, just about the soup, is someone asked if they can use a blender that isn't as strong as a Vitamix. I don't know, just like a less powerful blender.
Yeah, absolutely, they can. It might take a little bit longer to blend it to be as smooth as you like it, but the squash, as long as it's cooked really well and is soft, it's gonna all blend up. Yeah.
Very nice. And yeah, I know you said people could also use an immersion blender if they have that. And I'm sure like a food processor would probably work as well. Okay, let me see. Let's get to some more of the questions.
And someone also asked if the soup could be frozen too. I saw that go past in the chat, and I just wanted to say absolutely it can be frozen. Just pour it into a freezer safe container, whatever it is that you like to use. Freeze it, take it out, thaw it, and heat it up. That's it.
Very nice. Good to know. Okay, let me see. Vicki, for the apples, someone asked if they can bake the apples. They said they don't have a crock pot.
Absolutely. You absolutely could. And that's kind of traditionally how I grew up. My mom used to bake them in the oven in a casserole dish. So the idea of using a slow cooker is just kind of a little more hands off because you don't have to keep an eye on it, but absolutely you can. And again, it would just be kind of just keeping an eye on the timing to get a feel for how long it would take. I'm guessing that you'd still be in that same range of about an hour, maybe around 350, 325 to 350. That's just a guess because that's not the way I do it. But that's kind of where I would probably start if I was going to try it in the oven.
Okay, oh, very nice. Lisa, for the salad, someone asked if the Brussels sprouts were also roasted and for how long, if they were.
Yes, I put all of the vegetables in the same pan and roasted them all together for the same amount of time. I put the sliced onions, the peeled and cubed beets, and then I took the Brussels sprouts and I just kind of washed them and quartered them and put those in as well. And just roasted it all for the same amount of time so that they were all in there and they were all ready at the same time to put on the salad.
A huge thank you again to both Vicki and Lisa for joining us tonight. Everything looked so wonderful. Jealous of your dinner you both are about to have after this. And yeah, I think that's it. So thanks so much everyone again for joining us tonight. And I hope you all have a wonderful evening. And I hope you have a wonderful Thanksgiving and enjoy some delicious plant-based recipes.
Thanks for having us.
Take care, everyone. Bye.